Went to Kamal's office. I told him the structure that I have worked. He was fascinated. The title was not supposed to be Guna. It took about half an hour or 40 minutes to bring out this song.
You met Kamal Haasan on the sets of Abura Sagodaragal when you went to pitch Chanakyan, the Malayalam film that was made later. What about Guna, which was your second collaboration with Kamal Haasan? How did the germ of that idea come about? In the sense that, how did you get the idea for this mentally unbalanced young man who lives in a sex workers colony and who wants to cleanse himself by marrying the goddess Abhirami? How did that germ come about?
We had planned a project and I even wrote that script. It was based on a revolution that was happening in the Tamils who were involved in that. And then we had a Sri Lankan based kind of insurgency that happened. And based on that, it was about a reporter's tale. Then we went to Cho Ramaswamy sir, and he was the person who analyzed this and said that you are mad, you guys are mad to do this at this point of time. And then we had to rework on something. Then in our interactions, I just managed to speak about a person who I knew when I was a child. You know, he's a guy who is around the kitchen areas of the neighborhood. And we used to call him Pottan. Pottan means the fool, the ignorant kind of in Malayalam. And this was a character which was out there. And then Kamal really wanted to know more about it and make it into a structure and story, which I never had. Then a very sporadic, or rather a very unprecedented situation was happening in my life as a person. And it was about marriage and separations and kind of thing. So in that context, I had to suddenly leave for my hometown in Alappuzha. Monday morning, I was supposed to meet Kamalji and tell this story to him. When I reached there at 7, I found the flight was delayed for 2 hours. And apart from the 3 days of agonizing baggage that I was carrying, I could find
the personal baggage.
The personal baggage. And then I found a corner and ordered 2 black coffees, stiff ones, and then I was actually dozing. At the same time, my mind was clogged in many ways, but I had to do this. And then I started jotting down. This was a personal experience for me, where I believe in writing from the heart comes as a flow of events, which you try to fabricate or become more or less an organic process which a writer's mind goes through, comparing his experience to that he could contribute to a character in development.
Right.
Came here at 11, went to Kamal's office. I told him the structure that I have worked. And he was fascinated.
And he was always this religious obsession.
That actually came by from the mother's character, who was very religious. At the same time, she was running a prostitution, a brothel house.
Yeah.
And he was the only male member in that community.
Right. Was Guna always the name of the character?
That again, yeah, Gunashekaran was the name. But the title was not supposed to be Guna.
Right.
That was again a very interesting thing happened when we were going for the Rakhi. Near Berijam, we found a milestone which was written Madhikattan Sole.
Right.
Madhikattan Sole, immediately I told Kamal that this is the title of the film, because Madhikatta Venda Sole, and Sole is the ultimate motif of, I would call it, romance and love. So then I think it was not considered because of some other reasons. And then naturally the other alternative was Guna.
What were Kamal Haasan's contributions to the script?
Once he gets into the character, he is a person of immense source of evolving the character. We would remember that scene where, the Pentathol scene where he just walks. It was written per se of that movement, of that he was walking faster and faster till he could hit on the wall and collapse. This was what's written. But the way in which he made that work, and maybe with a camera person and DOP and Sandhana Bharati, who was coordinating with that. All this actually made that maybe 50, 60 times better than what was written.
Right. So that is the acting on the sets. What I'm asking is also, when you gave the screenplay, were there tweaks that he did that kind of modified a bit here or there, or polished it?
Yeah.
Can you
That
name
is,
a couple?
Maybe that scene where he comes up and hits with the Ammi.
The mother.
The mother, the confrontation with the mother. That actually was, he was actually angry with the mother. That was in the script. But it actually developed more than that. It became a child in him who is actually quarreling with the mother. At the same time, he is also showing the strength of the person.
Right. There is a core similarity between Guna and earlier the Kamal film Munram Pirai, in the sense that in both these films, they are very, very different films in terms of story and, you know, texture, tonality, everything, religious thing that's not there. That's a purer love story, just simpler love story. But what I'm trying to get at is, in both these films, Kamal kind of a simpleton, and he takes a woman away from her natural surroundings and becomes her guardian in a different kind of place, almost revering her as a kind of an idealized kind of person. When you wrote the screenplay, did this strike you?
I think this is the first time I am seeing this as a comparison, because there was other comparison people were talking about later, maybe 2 years later after the movie was made, was a movie called Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down.
The Pedro
Almodovar's movie.
Yeah.
But it had nothing to do with that. My focus was only this.
Right.
That actually happens in that scene where Paurnami Varno. Then the lady says, "Look at my eyes and this is Paurnami."
Right. She does this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he puts the thaali. And that again is being inculcated, or he grabs it from a psychopathic statement.
Hey Rosie, என்ன நம்ம பையனை பார்த்துட்டு வரியா? கல்யாணம் பண்ணிக்கிறியா? பௌர்ணமியில பண்ணிக்கோ. நல்ல விருத்தியாகும்.
அட போயா. உன்னால தான் எல்லாம்.
That thaali is there where you can tie the person down.
Right.
But once he ties the thaali, the poor guy is snoring. It is an unadulterated love.
Right.
That's I find as the sublime love, which I wanted to define.
Right. Guna hates his face, his father's face. He calls himself ugly. Was that something that you brought into
Absolutely,
the mix?
because the point is this guy is frustrated inside, which he cannot, I would say, articulate well.
Right.
And he is missing a father, because he has seen only a motherly face, a mother's face, a feminine face. And Rosie is another character who is again feminine but attached to him. And all other, sex workers who are there. And he hates him for he doesn't have a reason. He wants to resent a face he hasn't seen. I probably have another story. Maybe it is, I'm fascinated by this great inquiry of how you have to show your resentment to a masculine or a macho character who never had a regard for you, or just discarded you, and never showed his masculine responsibility as a kid. I have maybe a similar character which also has this kind of a revengeful attitude to a father he hasn't seen. So he's in search of that.
Okay.
So maybe that's something, but my dad was a great, excellent person.
Okay.
I never had that kind of an experience, but at the same time I have seen people talking about it, not giving the entire meaning to it, but at the same time I could get their sense of anger within.
Right. Was the film always set in Hyderabad with the mix of Telugu and Tamil?
Yes. Especially, you remember the first shot of this, it was a singular shot where
it starts with him on the Shiva pose, and then it
comes down and goes up, and it was a steady cam, kind of different levels and kind of stuff is there. And that was one area where it is rocky. It's a natural confinement.
Right. That is, they are confined in these.
They are confined in this bondage.
Okay. Okay.
Internally and externally.
Okay. Talking of another set in the loosest sense, the cave became a huge talking point when the film was released, and even today, people say Guna caves.
Guna caves.
So, was that also in the script? Did you envisage?
No. We went for the recce there, and this Madhikattan Sole nearby that milestone was this thing. That is when Kamal also was suggestive that this could be a grave-like thing. At the same time, it could give a different dimension to the whole thing. And executing that was again a great experience, because we all as a unit had to go about 1.5 hours before, where we had to carry small bits of the equipments out there, and even a person like Kaka Radhakrishnan had to come down to that space, and we had to literally help him. There were ladders, that bamboo-based ladders kept all over, and after the shoot was over, we all had to stay back for another 1.5 hours to carry it back. So it was a tremendous experience out there.
So in your screenplay, where was Kamal keeping the girl?
It was actually not a cave. It was actually a mountainous region. There was no cave per se on that. But there was a hideout there, and he used to know that hideout. No one else knew.
Knew about it. Okay.
It was his all private thing. So there was a very private space is what I had written. I never had that vision of this huge cave, which came by.
What is the biggest challenge when it comes to having a unique concept, a unique character, and making it palatable and appealing to a large mainstream audience as a screenwriter?
It's a great question. So when we create a character which has layers, it may have a very specific nature, which actually makes the character look away from the common 100,000 other characters available.
Right.
So this specificity has to be commercialized. This specificity has to marry well with the cinematic exaggeration. Cinema is an exaggeration.
Right.
It is not life. So when you make and combine that exaggeration woven into the character and the events that follow, I think it becomes commercially viable.
To get a little specific about your specificity, so you're saying that, okay, let's take, so this Kamal character is totally unique. You know what, that's one of the things about Kamal Haasan is he's always played these very unique characters all through. Okay, so he's from a, he's been raised in a sex workers colony. His mother is this very religious woman who's also running like a brothel, and he has his dreams of escaping the situation by marrying the goddess, right?
Yes.
So you're creating, let's say, these three layers. Now, what is the cinematic exaggeration in this?
Yeah, the cinematic exaggeration is carrying that Kadhal, that stone, and making cinematic exaggeration is nothing but I can see you now as your whole self.
Right.
But in cinema, I can see your eyes alone.
Okay.
This is what I am talking about, the cinematic exaggeration. So when it comes to your lips alone, your hands alone, or you show that, we need to consider that as we develop the scene, and making it into conflict, which will provide a story backup.
What are some of the big changes between what you wrote on the page and what turned out on screen?
For positive or negative?
Both.
The scene where he gets the premonition or the acceptance of the girl as his Abhirami.
In the temple.
In the temple.
Right.
Where she comes with the laddus and in a yellow colored golden type sari,
right.
And there is the pointers connect with that. I have actually given not the detail of the temple there, because I was not aware of these pointers available there. But as a wholesome scene when it is made, plus the kind of song which elevated that whole thing,
right.
I was off.
A negative scene that did not...
Personally, I found that Kamal's face became gory, overtly. And because of his, the kind of twists in his arms and the whole body looks, it came as more demonic for me.
Okay.
But at that point, I also supported it. But when I watched it in film, and I watched it with masses or with people around, they sometimes, they appreciated it sometimes, but at the same time, as a person, as a layman looking at it, I thought maybe he could have looked a little better, or this was overtly done.
But do you think this could be an example of what you say is cinematic exaggeration, which allows...
No, that exaggeration should be palatable. See, the exaggeration cannot be overtly done. Exaggeration has a limit.
What was your idea when you wrote the sparrows in the abandoned church? They are like a parallel couple with Guna and Abhirami. I mean, they even have a little baby. You know, there's an egg.
Perhaps the whole idea I told you, it was actually a motif. It was actually a paraphrasing what goes through in Guna's mind or what he looks forward to in life.
Right.
You know? So instead of showing people, because it's not possible, at the same time you have a nature which is very organic, which is supportive, and he loves that nature.
Right.
He talks to these people, and that's his world.
Yeah.
So this is actually a portrayal of the character's world.
Okay, okay.
And when the jackal actually who's there, you know, he says that he's calling, he's out there, I'm coming. So he knows that this is his world. He is free there. While a person from the outside world find it incarceration.
Right. Was there anything in the film like this that you wrote but was later taken out of the screenplay?
There was one scene where Ganesh Iyer explains to him while they were in that hospital, explains to him what happened to his wife. So the Abhirami is explained there.
Okay.
This question was unanswered to some audiences. They asked, who is Abhirami? Okay. That was not considered in the script or the screenplay. Actually, there was a particular scene.
Okay.
Just mentioning, not spoon-feeding about it, but at the same time, we could get a clear idea about why he is seeking Abhirami.
Why this idea was
What
planted.
is Abhirami or who is Abhirami?
Okay.
That was there.
The action scenes are really brutal. You just mentioned the demonic aspect of Kamal Haasan after a point. How much of it, did you write any signs like this man was impaled on a tree or something?
No, the point is inside that there is a sequence. I just wrote about a paragraph plus. On certain instances of the character was actually nailed to a tree. There was a huge, this guy has huge strength when it comes to a certain limit.
Right.
So that strength was shown by lifting the man and pushing him into a tree. But it was not that the peg would go through him, it was not written.
You spoke a bit about the letter earlier. Now, the whole idea of God or a goddess is the fact that you can just pray and they will hear you, right? That is the concept of a divine being. That a letter, on the other hand, is a very human, mundane way of communicating the other. So how did you think of writing a letter to a god? What is the...
No, there are two angles to it, Bharadwaj. One is Guna as a person who looks at this girl and is awed by this person.
Right.
And he actually is giving her the so-called, in quotes I would say, unadulterated love.
Right.
Which he doesn't speak out. But at the same time, we need to communicate to an audience through something.
Right.
The love is, it is not a platonic love either, but at the same time, it is an unadulterated love. So when it comes to a girl and a man, and the girl realizing this sublime love, which she could distinguish from many others she would have experienced in her urban life.
Right.
This letter was actually a bridge.
Talking about the letter scene, you have this now legendary song based on it.
That actually is, I would call it Ilayaraja sir's great genius.
So that did you in your screenplay, was it?
Yes.
It led into a
the
song?
The letter was there.
No, the letter was there, but it did lead into a song?
Yes.
Okay.
Leading into a song. And basically what happened was when this scene was narrated, immediately he put his harmonium.
கண்மணி அன்போடு காதலன் நான் எழுதும் கடிதமே பொன்மணி உன் வீட்டில் சௌக்கியமா நான் இங்கு சௌக்கியமே.
It took about half an hour or 40 minutes
Right.
to bring out this song. It was in Fisherman's Cove. I was also present there, but the kind of genius and the kind of simplicity which captures and the music that captures you into it, it's phenomenal.
I'm just thinking of it now, I get
Yes,
goosebumps,
yes,
you know. So now I've always wanted to ask this of a screenwriter. Now you're writing on paper and you know, in a closed room, and there's, you know, all this stuff, and then you see the movie, and this movie has one of Ilayaraja's grandest, most amazing scores. How much of a transformation is there? I mean, do you kind of see a completely different thing, because you already know what you wrote? So when you see it with this kind of a magnificent score, how is your reaction?
I was just floored by this whole thing.
Right.
And how a music and the way in which Kamal jumped onto a rock and sat by it, and the way he was presenting it, plus the music which was blending into a conversation.
Right.
எனக்கு உண்டான காயம் அது தன்னால ஆறிடும். அது என்னமோ தெரியல, என்ன மாயமோ தெரியல, எனக்கு ஒண்ணுமே ஆவறதில்ல.
So this was a phenomenal outcome that I could see.
Do you recall a scene that was similarly lifted to like 100-fold with the background music, because that's another part of the
Yes, one thing was when Rosie comes in there and there is a fan which works.
Right. Before the Unnai Nanariven song.
Yes. Even that, for me as a person and a writer, I could see that song was very touching. The song could trigger this schizophrenic person and a sister who is looking at him, or a girl who wants a brother who wants to pacify him and be part of his life somewhere. And the song actually worked well. Even the sort of guilt the mother carried through.
It's interesting, you saw Rosie as a kind of a sister character.
More or less, yes.
Oh, I completely got the idea that she wanted to...
No, it was not a romantic...
Not a romantic, but she kind of saw, like even in the end, she says, "Idu mottum eppadiyo samalishtinga, inime na paathukuren." I got that feeling that...
No, it was a very genuine friend or a sisterly...
Okay. I should watch the film again and
Yes,
see it from
look
this
at it,
point of
look
view.
at it.
What do you think of Kamal Haasan as a screenwriter? Is there any particular favorite film of his that...
No, I think he is a master. He is the one thing that I have always awed about his creativity is the spontaneous outflow of things, and this is where his genius, so-called genius, that we could experience through his various films, his tenacity to execute, the courage that he makes to prove certain things that he has worked creatively. These are things which work in favor of him. And he has a tremendous experience of cinematic life.
Right.
Which he can judge, which he can assess. At the same time, I would say there has to be someone who he should talk to and perhaps refine the flow of things, flow of creativity that comes by.
Which recent film impressed you with its screenplay? Not necessarily a Kamal Haasan film, but something that you saw recently that...
I loved two films at those times. One was Pizza and the other was Soodhu Kavvum.
Soodhu Kavvum, yeah.
Soodhu Kavvum was an excellent film, structure-wise.
Right.
Similarly, Pizza also carried that structure, which is basically, I refer that movie as an example for a great plot variation from linear form. How do you deviate from it? Late, I saw this Maanagaram.
Yeah.
Maanagaram also had its... I'm not saying it completely well, but at the same time, Maanagaram and the other movie with Rahman was acting.
Dhuruvangal
Padhinaaru. It had lots of reversals, maybe too much of reversals, but at the same time, the attempt of a person to take it up through that channel was very good.
Yeah.
Was very good. Then this, of course, our Pushkar
Gayatri's
Gayatri's recent venture,
Vikram Vedha.
Vikram Vedha. It also carried though not with too much of structural pattern, but at the same time, the way in which the whole treatment takes place is engaging.
What is your all-time favorite screenplay? Can you name one?
I loved this movie Kadhal.
Okay, Balaji Shaktivel's. Okay.
It was a very touching film as a viewer. I'm not talking about a writer, but the wholesome movie actually affects you. I couldn't come out of that movie for a minimum 3-4 days.
I wanted to ask you, you teach screenwriting, you've been teaching screenwriting for a while, and to the aspiring screenwriters who are watching this program, can writing a screenplay be taught like the way physics or maths is taught? Is there a science behind the art?
Of course, it is not a science. I would call it a principle.
Okay.
This principle is not rules. It shouldn't be confused with rules. Why? Because when you talk about screenwriting, you're talking about writing life. That's why it becomes complex. So we are actually extending, stories are extensions of life. So for that, apart from learning the principles will ease your process of writing. Actually, we need to take a process. The basic question of the challenge that every writer has to confront when he goes to write a screenplay is, what should I write?
Right.
So when you know what to write, then writing becomes easy. When you talk about love, in my college days, when I went to chase a girl and the kind of thrill that I used to get, are the kids getting it now? They don't. So when you write that kind of a love, when I write that kind of a love or romance or chasing, it doesn't work here anymore. I need to get into a slot where they have a certain definition about chasing and getting to know people. Maybe it is all benefit-based relationship, which was not there when. So there has to be, this evolution has to be considered, and probably one has to go into the thick of life. So that actually, so I always tell aspiring students, you take a bus ride, you take a train ride, don't take your bike and always move by. I remember I have gone to Dharavi and stayed there for 15 days to get a research on what I had to write for a Hindi-based film, which took place. There I saw a girl, I had been given that opportunity to a Qawwali kind of a dance in a small dirty room. The way in which that girl was getting herself ready to do this, because it was a very privatized performance that I had to experience there. But all the time she was looking back to another room. And that was, her son was sleeping there, 2-year-old son was sleeping, and she never wanted to wake him up. At the same time, she had to do it for money. This is something which actually captured me, which is a life experience. So when I write about sometime a character like this happens to arrive in my scene or a screenplay, I will get this life experience to contribute to that scene. It can't, maybe I would have read it in some book, but when I go through that myself, then I can give colors and definitions to it.
Thank you so much. Hi, this is Bharadwaj Rangan. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see more, do subscribe to Film Companion South.